Hi, can you hear me? Alright, let's go. So, in September 2018, Apple released something that was mind blowing enough to sell over 77.4 million copies. Someone may ask, what's that? Well, I'm about to tell you today, so Charlie, sit through us to walk through the journey of iPhone XR, or should I say the 10R as the hit from us. So, the iPhone XR, or should I say the 10R, was the anniversary edition of the iPhone series, which is a journey that started, I think, let's say back in 2007, right? So to mark their 10th anniversary, Apple had to skip the iPhone 9 series and then jump straight to iPhone 10 series. We saw great iPhones like the X, XR, XS, and XS Max. And then later, the legendary big brother iPhone 10R or the XR joined the line. And that phone did pretty well because as of Q3 of 2019, iPhone XR had already sold about 27 million copies, which was outrageous at the moment and was Apple's best-selling iPhone at that time. And to date, as of 2025, early 2025, the phone has sold a good amount of about 78 million copies, which is mind-blowing. But we are in 2025 and people are still buying iPhone XR. So I think today is the right time we delve into if this phone is still valid and tech savvy, like good for tech savvy people like us in 2025. So Charlie, let's go in. So Apple marketed the iPhone XR or the 10R as their budget friendly phone, just like the SE series that they used to drop, and for now they've stopped to replace with the 16E, but it was marketed as a budget phone. And looking at the core specs too, it wasn't that bad. And at the time it was released, I would say it was a gold mine because the iPhone 10R or the XR, I don't even keep confusing the two. It's the same thing. So the iPhone XR at the time had a 2942 milliampere hour battery. It also had a single rear camera, which was a big disadvantage. Looking at the X, even the X having one camera and a telephoto lens, but even though it was a downgrade, it was still debatable because at least it was a budget phone, even though it was bigger than the main phone of the lineup, which was the X. But it had a 12 megapixel rear camera and then a 7 megapixel front facing camera for selfie and fun documentaries and stuff. So it was a good trade. Also, unlike the current flagship phones of Apple and the latest releases, even that year the X that was released, right, the iPhone X had an OLED display, which we all know OLED gives better color. The picture quality is very good on OLED cameras. But Apple decided, since XR was a budget-friendly phone, they decided to go with an LCD liquid retina display, which wasn't that bad. But compared to phones of its era and phones now, I would say it was a little bit of a downgrade, but it was still a good bid. So Apple chose to go for that. And with the storage-wise, they did a 3 gig RAM, and also the storage options for the iPhone 10R were between 64 gig on the lowest and then 256 gig on the highest. Which, come to think of it, it's surprising to know that now the highest of that phone model is now the lowest storage offered on the iPhone 17 Pro and the iPhone 17 lineup we just launched few weeks ago. So it's quite interesting, but I think Apple is getting there. So let's applaud them, Charlie. But it's quite surprising. But one thing that's very difficult for me to wrap my head around right now is 2018 was when iPhone XR was released. And just it's 7 years. Like the phone is 7 years and it's still popular. Even though I have my own issues with people who use the XR, like I don't know about it. I just have my own issues with them. So let's put that aside. But even so it's quite a good phone. It runs on the A12 Bionic chip, which was a gold mine at its era because it was one of Apple's English fastest ever CPU if you ever use them, blah 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 blah. And it was water resistant for a phone that was built 7 years ago and still having it can still in some like specs it can still match up to some 100 flagships of today giving. So XR was quite something Apple just did for an experiment and it blew up big time for them. So moving on from the core specs, you can guess it's right. Let's talk about the speed. So for someone who does maybe normal YouTube, social media, TikTok, Snapchat, and all the body things online, like yes, for someone who does all those core things, I think the iPhone 10R, the iPhone XR could be a good bargain. Why do I see this? The iPhone XR could be a good bargain for you, but on the larger side, for someone who maybe some small, like some of the small games around can handle it quite well, even though it's just a lower refresh rate, but it was still a good bargain. But for someone who plays big games and some of these modern games that need higher CPU, they are more CPU intense. Some people who does more CPU intense stuff on their phones, I think that's where you might begin to see it lag a little. But if you're someone who just uses for day-to-day calls and TikToking, YouTubing, and all the social media browsing and stuff, you'll be good to go. So I think that's it for its performance and speed wise. So with that being said, I like this. So with that being said, let's start moving on to the red flags of the iPhone XR. Starting off is, should I even say, the battery life. You know, in this era where phones, even I wouldn't have wanted to mention competitors, but even in Africa here, Itel and Techno and, you know, I don't want to comment on this, but even them, they are trying their best to give 5,000 milliampere hour batteries. Even Samsung gives sometimes 5,000, 4,000 and more than that in their flagship phones. And it's quite mediocre to see Apple's giving a poor 2,942 milliampere hour battery on the iPhone XR. But in the year it was released, I think it was kind of a big deal. And you know, 7 years down the line, tech has quite evolved, but just quite a bargain though. But the thing is, the iPhone XR in today's money wouldn't last for a full day, honestly, because I've used an iPhone XR before, like a few months ago, and the longest it had lasted me on a full charge was around, I think, was around 5 hours. And as someone whose screen time per day is around 14 hours, so it's quite understandable, but it's quite a good bargain. And on a full charge, if it can take you 5-6 hours, then you should be thanking your God. So if maybe you're planning on getting an iPhone XR, then that could be your trade-off. And moving on to, let's say, the security and then the software wise of the iPhone XR, we'll get to see, am I talking too fast? We'll get to see more red flags because with the latest iOS model that was released, which was iOS 19, that Apple decided to dab for some way or some reasons to make it fit the years and then named it iOS 26, XR was finally here. This is a news that excites me a lot for reasons I don't know, but XR was finally ejected, like bounced from the iOS 26 series. So if you're planning on getting an XR or use an XR, it's quite sad to hear, but yeah, I'm happy though. I'm happy you were taking that because XR have been damn in there for too long. X was left in iOS 16 and XR still lived up to iOS 18.6. So it's quite an improvement for you guys to use it, to experience that. And about security too, you know, Apple sometimes when they kick you out of the iOS update, maybe you might get security feature update for a few years and then you'll be out of the league. So let's just say the iPhone XR is gradually becoming a grandfather. I think it's even a great grandfather, and it will soon be an obsolete phone, or should I say in Apple's word, a vintage iPhone model. So let's just wait till that unfolds and let's continue our checks. Okay, about camera. Okay, I think we talked about camera. So let's move on to the next one, which is the pricing. Doing research on this video, I was trying to, you know, I had an iPhone XR for these kind of purposes, but the phone was just annoying, so I had to sell it. So I was trying and buy a new one online, and it wasn't that much. It wasn't that cheap too, but it's not too expensive too. So looking up on Amazon, I think on Amazon, the iPhone, what's going on with me? The iPhone XR was around $154 ish kind of range. So the cheapest I saw at the time I did my research was around $154, and then we have some around $155, but it was around that range. And then on eBay, some used ones, UK used one, which sometimes is very scary to buy a UK used iPhone, but the UK used ones were on eBay were going for $134 to $200, which is, I think, a good entry level if you are someone moving from the iPhone 6, 7, and you want to come to the full screen, and you want to ditch the home button and go in for the Face ID kind of thing, then bro, you're welcome to the league. But the iPhone XR won't last you for long. Let's move on to the next thing. So prior to me doing this video, someone texted me about the iPhone XR, asking who is for and who it wasn't for. And I think if you're watching, please you answer. So the iPhone XR, I would say in today's money, I'll kind of say it's a good fit for students and then people who are living on like tight budget. Maybe you just move into a new city on budget, but you still want to, you know, the luxury of using an Apple product or kind of thing. That would be a good bargain for you to buy an iPhone XR, right? But moving on to those who is not for, then that's where I have a problem. Because if you're someone who likes mobile gaming, like very intensive game, not bubble Candy Crush, and come on, you're too good for that. You shouldn't be playing Candy Crush in this era. So someone who does CPU intensive gaming, I think is a red flag for you to buy iPhone XR. And then for someone who does media, a lot of video content creation and kind of stuff, I think in some way it's a good deal if you are starting. But if you're someone who has the numbers and who expects a lot from you, I don't think an XR is something you should go for. That's kind of it. Alright, so we've gotten to the final lap and my final verdict on the iPhone XR. Why was it that iPhone ever? Kofi, give me some drum rolls. Okay, so moving on. I think the iPhone XR in 2025 is an aging device. It's not something you should really want to buy if like you need a phone that you can use for 2, 3, 4 years from now. But some people will still buy it anyway after watching this. So, but for me, I wouldn't buy it if I really wanted a phone that I could, because I want to use the phone for 3, 4 years at least before I could update. And since it's out of iOS updated, it's not going to give me anything new. I don't think it's something I'll go for. Maybe I'll add up a little to buy iPhone 11, which is still having at least 1 year left on its iOS update, or maybe iPhone 12 series, which has 2 more years to go. Or maybe I'll just rob a bank and buy iPhone 17 Pro. Or maybe the 16E, which is also like the new son of the great-grandchild of, what's the police? The great-grandchild of iPhone XR. Maybe that would be it. Too long to read and too long to whatever. After all the long talk, I think if you watch this video to this far and you're still using an iPhone XR, I think this might be your time to upgrade. So let me know if you're going to upgrade in the comment section or you're still going to buy. Charlie, if you've liked this video so far, subscribe to this channel, like, follow for more, and find me on social media handles. And I think you might like this video I did about Nano Banana, so it will be somewhere here or here. Go watch it.